So my name's David Burgner. I'm a paediatrician and researcher working at Murdoch Children's Research Institute in Melbourne. One of my great research interests has been on Kawasaki disease, which is the commonest cause of heart disease that's acquired during childhood. So there's probably, we think, up to a case a day in Australia. Worldwide, there are tens of thousands of cases every year. It's particularly common in Northeast Asia, in Japan, Korea and Taiwan. So for example, in Japan, it's thought that 1 in 100 children will have Kawasaki disease. What we're interested in is trying to understand whether the children who develop Kawasaki disease are different from normal children. So is there something different about their immune response? Kawasaki disease is a very exaggerated immune response to probably an infection. And these children get very inflamed, and that inflammation can damage the arteries supplying blood to the heart. Thanks to Heart Kids, we're able to look at some of those data to see whether these children are hardwired, if you like, to have a different immune response to common infections. The second part is, what's the long-term risk? If a child's had Kawasaki disease and their coronary arteries seem to return to normal or seem to have some ongoing problem, what's the long-term risk? Can we get a measure of their long-term risk in terms of future heart attack, future heart disease? And one way of doing that is to look in detail at the lipids and other molecules, other chemicals in their blood. And with the Heart Kids support, we're able to analyse some very novel data that looks in great detail at the cholesterol and other lipids in the blood, as well as other markers that might help us understand whether these children are at greater risk. If we understood why these children are different, why they develop Kawasaki disease, we could develop specific treatments or even prevention for Kawasaki disease. If we had a marker or some sort of test in the blood that would allow us to say this child is at higher risk, this child is at lower risk of future heart disease, then we could think about treating those children differently. We could give different advice to the families. We might be able to be more aggressive with our prevention of heart disease for those children. So there is potentially clinical impact at both ends, both in terms of prevention and treatment and in terms of long-term risk management for these children. Kawasaki disease, as I mentioned, is a relatively unusual condition in children, and in terms of funding, that often puts us at a significant disadvantage. The emphasis on heart research is largely on adult cardiovascular disease, but it means that pediatric research and pediatric research in a relatively unusual disease is very hard to come by. In order to get funding, you need some preliminary data. You need to show some findings that you're onto something. And these small grants really do make a difference because they allow us to generate those preliminary data. They allow us to explore a hypothesis to show that we're on the right track. And that's a huge advantage in terms of applying for larger grants or being part of international studies. So even though the absolute sums may not sound huge against the big funding bodies, the timing and their impact is really important.